The elevator doors slid shut with a metallic sigh, and in those 10 seconds my life split in two. My name is Margo Ellis, I'm 67, and a man died right after he slipped a folded note into my hand. It said only, "Fake sick and get out fast." 10 minutes later, his body was found on the floor I should have been on. Everyone called it an accident. But what they didn't know was that someone in this building wanted me gone too. Before I continue, tell me where you're watching from. And hit like and subscribe if you've ever been betrayed by family. That afternoon had started like any other Sunday. I'd just come back from the farmer's market, my grocery bags heavy with carrots, thyme, and a small roast I planned to make for dinner. The elevator hummed softly, that familiar sound of solitude between floors. When Victor Hale stepped in on the 4th floor, I barely looked up. He was the quiet, courteous type who always nodded and moved on. But that day, his hands were shaking. He didn't meet my eyes, and when our fingers brushed and he slipped that note into my palm, I felt his fear as if it were alive. I pretended to faint like the note told me. My heart thudded against my ribs. He pressed the emergency button, pried the door open, whispered, "Go, now." I stumbled out, clutching my chest. The doors closed behind him. That was the last time I saw Victor alive. Minutes later, sirens tore through the street. From my window, I saw the flashing lights, the neighbors gathering, the chaos. Someone said there was blood. I sat down in the hallway, the note trembling in my hand, and I realized I had no idea what kind of world I'd just stepped into. When I was younger, people used to call me the watchdog. I worked 30 years in the fraud division of an insurance company in Boston, learning how to hear lies breathe. My job wasn't to accuse, it was to wait, to let silence do the talking until the guilty filled it themselves. That skill doesn't retire with age, it just settles deeper into your bones. Back then, I believed life had rules. If you worked hard, stayed loyal, and paid attention, truth would protect you. But truth, I learned, doesn't protect, it exposes. Especially when the people closest to you have something to hide. Walter, my husband, used to tease me for being suspicious of everyone. He was an engineer, steady as stone, the kind of man who always kept receipts in alphabetical order. I thought we were opposites, his calm against my vigilance. But one rainy night, a few months before his accident, he woke me at 2 a.m., standing in the doorway with a look I'd never seen before. "If anything happens to me," he said quietly, "find Victor Hale. He's the only one you can trust." I remember laughing nervously. "Walter, what are you talking about? You sound like a movie character." But he didn't smile. His eyes glinted with something between fear and guilt. "Just promise me, Margo. Promise you'll remember that name," I promised. And then, like everything we never want to face, I filed that moment away somewhere dark. Our last Christmas together was the beginning of the end, though none of us knew it then. The living room smelled of pine and cinnamon, the tree blinking unevenly. My son Noah was there with his wife Sloane, who had her phone in her hand more than her fork. Walter had poured himself a small glass of whiskey and was talking about the Ellis family land in Vermont property passed down since his grandfather's time. Sloane leaned forward, pretending interest. "You know, Dad," she said sweetly, "that land is just sitting there. You could sell it and start a trust for Noah's daughter's college. It's wasted money." Walter set his glass down. "Some things aren't for sale," she laughed, just a little too loud. "I'm not saying sell your memories, Walter. I'm saying use your assets wisely. You can't take land to the grave." The silence afterward was so sharp I could hear the clock ticking. Walter looked at her like she'd stepped on something sacred. I saw the faint tremor in his hand, the muscle tightening in his jaw. Later that night, after they left, he sat at his desk and wrote something on a yellow legal pad. He didn't tell me what it was, but weeks later, after the funeral, I found it inside his safe. A codicil and addendum to his will. It said the Vermont land would remain untouched, protected for family heritage purposes. Beneath his signature, one short line, "For Margo, who still knows what home means." I cried when I read it, and then I noticed something else. The notary stamp wasn't from his office. It was from a freelance financial consultant named Sloane Mercer. I didn't understand how she'd been involved in notarizing my husband's final document. Not yet. but that tiny inconsistency scratched at the back of my mind like a small, relentless nail. I've always been good at noticing patterns. You spend years in fraud investigation, and you start to see them everywhere, in speech, in posture, in how people avoid eye contact when they lie. Sloane had a pattern, too. Whenever she wanted something, she'd start with affection. Compliments first, then the charm, then pressure wrapped in guilt. "You're so strong, Margo, but you should rest. Let us handle the estate." I wasn't stupid. I knew when someone was setting a stage. But back then, I still believed Noah would never let her manipulate him. He was bright, kind, just tired. Working in a bank had changed him, made him cautious, afraid of losing his footing. One evening, after Walter's death, Noah came over with Sloane. He looked uneasy. "She did all the talking, Mom," she said, placing her manicured hand on my arm. "Walter left a lot of things tangled up. It's better if we transfer some of the assets into an investment account. Less stress for you." Her tone was calm, professional. I almost believed she was trying to help. But then I noticed the faint outline of a folder under her purse, the same brand of folder Walter used for confidential work files. I asked, "Where did you get that?" She smiled thinly, "From the office." Noah picked it up. Noah looked down. He didn't meet my eyes. That night I went to bed with an ache behind my ribs I couldn't name. The kind of ache that tells you love and doubt can live in the same heartbeat. Months passed. The apartment building quieted after Walter's funeral. I filled my days with routine tea at 7, grocery lists, the crossword I never finished. But every time I entered the elevator, I remembered the time it had broken down last year with 3 children inside. I'd been trapped with them for 15 minutes, keeping them calm, teaching them how to breathe. The hum of the motor, the metallic smell it, had all felt familiar in a way that now made my stomach twist. That elevator had tested my patience once before. I didn't know it would test my life later. Then Victor moved in. He lived 2 floors below, polite to the point of invisibility. Always carried a small leather notebook, always greeted me with "Good morning, Mrs. Ellis." There was something old-fashioned about him, like a man who'd learned to measure every word. One afternoon, while waiting for the elevator, I saw him staring at the wall of mailboxes. "Do you ever notice," he said, "how people trust locks that anyone can pick?" I smiled. "That's why I use glue." He laughed softly. Then, without looking at me, added, "Your husband was right to keep records. Not everyone does." I froze. "I'm sorry, did you know Walter?" He hesitated a long time ago. "He was a good man." It should have ended there, but something in his tone made me ask, "What kind of good?" He smiled faintly. "The kind that tries to fix other people's messes, even when it costs him." I didn't realize until much later that he wasn't talking in riddles. He was warning me. That night, I opened Walter's safe again. Among the insurance papers and mortgage statements, I found a smaller envelope sealed with red wax. Inside was a USB drive and a sticky note in his handwriting. "In case I'm not there to explain," the drive was empty. Completely blank. No files, no metadata. At first, I thought it was a mistake. But then I remembered Walter's sense of humor. He'd always said, "The truth's never on the surface. You have to dig where it hurts." It wasn't until weeks later, after the elevator, after Victor's death, that I'd understand the drive had been wiped intentionally, hidden, replaced, and someone in this building had the real one. I didn't know it back then, but every small detail, the codicil, the notarization, the wiped drive, even the quiet new neighbor, were all pieces of the same clockwork. A clock I had wound myself by trusting the wrong people. And the moment Victor Hale pressed that folded note into my palm, the clock finally started ticking loud enough for me to hear. The night after Victor's death, I couldn't sleep. I sat at my kitchen table staring at the folded note. The words, "Fake, sick, and get out fast," were written in blue ink, slightly smudged as if by a trembling hand. When I flipped it over, I noticed a faint second line, barely visible under the light. "Don't trust anyone in the building." That warning pulled me backward in time, to every moment I'd ignored my instincts for the sake of peace. A few years earlier, when Noah and Sloane first moved into the building, it had seemed like the perfect setup, family close enough to visit, far enough to have space. But even then, something about Sloane never sat right with me. She was polite, perfectly, so too perfectly. Her kindness had edges. She'd bring over fresh muffins, compliment my sweaters, then ask casual questions about Walter's insurance policies. "You must have learned so much about finance from your husband," she said once, pouring coffee into my cup, enough to know when someone's trying to redirect a conversation. I replied, watching the flicker in her smile. Back then, I chalked it up to personality differences. Sloane was ambitious, driven. I was grounded, private. But after Walter's death, her visits became less friendly and more strategic. She'd arrive with spreadsheets and legal folders, pretending to help me manage estate paperwork. One afternoon, while she was organizing documents, I caught her slipping one into her bag. "You forgot that's mine," I said quietly. She froze, hand still halfway inside. "Oh," she laughed lightly. "I thought it was one of the copies Noah made." There were no copies. I had locked the originals away. I didn't confront her. I just watched. That's how predators make mistakes, when they think you're too weak to notice. Walter used to say that every lie leaves fingerprints. Some are words, some are smells, some are timing. I started looking for them. When the first HOA meeting after his death came around, I went mostly to keep up appearances. Doris Whitaker, the president, wore pearls big enough to blind an optimist. She smiled wide and spoke softly, the kind of softness that usually hides teeth. After the meeting, I overheard her talking to Sloane in the hallway. "The board approved your request. Just don't mention my name if anyone asks who accessed the CCTV files." My breath caught. CCTV files? Why would my daughter-in-law need those? When they noticed me, their smiles returned instantly. "Oh, Margo," Doris chirped. "We were just talking about updating the security system. These old buildings, you know." I nodded politely. But inside, a cold, hard truth started to take shape. A few weeks later, I found an unmarked envelope slid under my door. Inside was a newspaper clipping, an article about a local businessman found dead after a financial scandal. Someone had underlined a single sentence. He was last seen meeting with an independent auditor named Victor Hale. My pulse quickened. Why would anyone send this to me? That night, I poured myself a glass of whiskey, the first one since Walter's funeral, and sat on the balcony. The city lights flickered across the river, reflected in the glass panes like ghosts. I thought about Walter's last words, Victor's warning, Sloane's smirk, the erased USB drive. It wasn't paranoia anymore. It was a pattern. And the pattern led back to the same point: money. I dug into Walter's old files again, this time looking not for answers, but for connections. His last project before the crash involved auditing a chain of shell companies. Some of the signatures on the transaction forms looked familiar, too familiar. One of them was Noah's. I remember the moment the air left my lungs. Noah had been working under pressure, drowning in debt. Sloane had helped him with investments, offering to restructure their family finances. My son, who once couldn't balance a checkbook without a calculator, had somehow become the signatory of multiple high-value transfers. I wanted to believe it was a mistake. I still do. But the truth was uglier. Sloane had used him as her front. The next morning, I went to see Noah at his bank. He looked startled to see me. His office smelled faintly of burnt coffee and expensive guilt. "Mom," he said, straightening his tie, "what are you doing here? I wanted to ask about your father's accounts." "There's a discrepancy in the trust documents." He blinked rapidly. "Discrepancy? Like what?" "Like signatures," I said evenly, "on forms you claim you've never seen." For a moment, he froze. Then his jaw clenched. "Mom, please don't start this. I'm not starting anything," I said softly. "I'm ending something." He looked away, fingers tapping the desk. "Sloane handles that side. She's better with paperwork." I studied him, his voice too rehearsed, his shoulders too tense. Walter's son. My son. The man who used to run to me after nightmares now hid behind his wife's lies. When I left his office, I knew two things for sure. He was in over his head, and Sloane was pulling the strings. A few days later, I went down to the maintenance office to speak with Caleb Ortiz, the young superintendent. He was kind, maybe too trusting for a job that required suspicion. "I heard there's missing footage from the day Victor died," I said. He hesitated. Who told you that? Let's just say the walls here have good hearing. He sighed, leaned closer. Yeah, the system glitched for 5 minutes. Right when the elevator stopped between floors, glitched or someone wiped it. The access log shows 2 IDs, Doris Whitaker and Sloane Mercer. I felt my pulse in my throat. Why would she? She said she was checking for a missing bracelet, he interrupted. Looking uneasy, said it had sentimental value. A missing bracelet. Right, probably the same one she flaunted at every dinner party. Caleb lowered his voice. I can recover fragments. Maybe not the video, but the audio files linked to the cameras in the hallway. I nodded slowly. Do it. And Caleb, be careful who you tell. That night, I walked past Sloane and Noah's apartment on the 8th floor. The door was slightly ajar. I heard their voices. I told you to keep her out of it, Sloane hissed. She's my mother, Noah said. She's a liability, she snapped. Do you think she'll stay quiet if she finds out what happened? What happened? He whispered. There was a pause, then Sloane's low, chilling reply. Exactly. Keep it that way. The door clicked shut. I walked back to my apartment, heart pounding, hands shaking, but my mind sharper than it had been in years. The last flashback that haunts me is from the day before Victor died. I ran into him in the lobby. He was pale, distracted. He looked like a man who'd already said his goodbyes. Mr. Hale, I said gently, you don't look well. He smiled faintly. I'm just tired, Mrs. Ellis. Some debts don't rest easy. He pressed the elevator button, then paused. Do you still have your husband's necklace? I touched the small silver lock pendant I'd worn every day since Walter's death. Yes. Why? He smiled. That same weary, knowing smile. Keep it close. It might hold more than you think. I didn't understand then. Not until much later, when I discovered what was hidden inside that pendant, a tiny compartment holding a memory card. But by then, Victor was dead. And every person I thought I knew in that building had become a stranger I could no longer trust. After Victor's death, the building changed. The walls seemed to breathe differently, like the air itself was holding secrets. Neighbors who once chatted in the hallway now averted their eyes. Doors closed faster. Conversations stopped when I walked by. I told myself it was paranoia. But the day the detectives came, I realized it wasn't just in my head. Detective Fiona Park had the kind of presence that silenced a room-sharp suit, sharper eyes. She stood in my doorway with a notebook in hand. Mrs. Ellis, she began. You were the last person to see Victor Hale alive. Correct. I nodded. Yes, in the elevator. Did he say anything unusual? I hesitated, then decided to tell her half the truth. He looked frightened, said he wasn't feeling well. Her pen stopped, nothing else. I looked down at my hands, nothing that made sense at the time. She studied me for a long moment, then said, his apartment was ransacked. But one thing stood out. We found your name on a notepad. Under it, 2 other names. Both crossed out. I blinked my name. Yes. Any idea why he'd write it? I forced a thin smile. Maybe he needed insurance advice. Her expression didn't change. If you remember anything, call me. She handed me her card, then left. The silence that followed was suffocating. That night, I sat by my window with a cup of tea gone cold, staring at the city lights, my name on Victor's notepad. 2 names crossed out. What did that mean? Did he plan to warn me? Or replace someone else with me? I turned the note over again and again, tracing the faint ink with my fingers. Don't trust anyone in the building. But how do you live when the threat is all around you? The next morning, an envelope was slid under my door. No name, no address, just like the one before. Inside was a photocopy of a newspaper article about a corporate scandal from years ago. A man named David Mercer Sloane's father had been convicted of embezzlement and served time before his company collapsed. Someone had circled his name in red ink and scribbled, like mother, like daughter. My hands shook. I hadn't even known she'd changed her last name after marriage. I looked toward the ceiling, toward the 8th floor, where Sloane and Noah slept under the illusion that they were still safe. I wasn't sure whether to feel pity or rage. A few days later, I found the courage to talk to Caleb again. We met in the maintenance office, dimly lit and cluttered with tools. He pulled up a file on his computer. I restored fragments from the day of the murder, he said. But the main video feed is gone. Someone wiped it clean. Someone, I repeated. He nodded. 2 access requests that day. Doris Whitaker from the HOA and Sloan Mercer. Both used different excuses. What did Doris say? She claimed the system was down, but she was wearing gloves, rubber ones. Same type we use with the wiring compound. Except her pair had a white powder residue. I frowned. You think she tampered with it? Caleb shrugged. If she didn't, she's covering for someone who did. He leaned closer. And Mrs. Ellis, one more thing. You might want to check your apartment locks. There's been activity in your key log. Activity. Someone used a cloned access fob to open your door at 2:07 a.m. 2 nights ago, the air drained from the room. Did you see who? He shook his head. No cameras in your hallway. HOA policy, of course. HOA policy, Doris's kingdom. I went home and checked everything. My drawers were untouched, my jewelry box still closed, but one thing was missing, the envelope with Victor's note. No sign of forced entry. The lock smooth. The only trace left behind was a faint scent of Sloane's perfume, sharp, citrusy, unmistakable. That night, I sat in the dark with the chain on the door and a hammer in my lap. I wasn't scared. I was furious. They'd taken from me before Walter's life, my peace, my trust, but not this time. The following day, Doris stopped me in the hallway. All smiles, Margo dear. I heard the police came by. Must be so stressful for you. Her tone was syrupy, her eyes anything but. Not as stressful as deleting footage from a crime scene, I replied coolly. Her smile faltered. Excuse me, I leaned closer. Next time you wear gloves to handle someone else's files, make sure you wash off the powder. It's a dead giveaway. For the first time since I'd known her, she didn't have a comeback. She just stared, lips trembling slightly, before walking away without another word. I watched her retreating figure, the hallway lights flickering above her, and thought, good. Let her feel watched for once. That evening, I played a recording from Caleb's recovered data. The audio was grainy, but faint voices echoed through the static Victor's, maybe, or Noah's. Then, a woman's tone, clipped and tense. 2 months. Papers. Clean it before she finds out. My blood ran cold. I recognized that phrasing. Sloan always said, clean it, never, fix it. It was her version of damage control. I pressed the playback again, turning up the volume until the static crackled through my speakers. I could hear footsteps, a door closing, and then silence. It wasn't proof, not yet, but it was enough to light the fuse. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. They'd taken the evidence once. They wouldn't get the chance again. The next move had to be mine. After hearing that recording, something inside me shifted. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was hunting. For days, I moved quietly through the building, observing. Every creak in the hallway felt like a confession. Every whispered neighbor conversation turned into a clue. People underestimate old women. They think age dulls your edge. But it only sharpens what truly matters, the ability to see through the noise. One morning, I caught Doris arguing with someone outside the HOA office. Her voice, normally syrupy, cracked with panic. I did what you asked. I deleted it. Now leave me out of it. The door slammed. A few seconds later, Sloan emerged, sunglasses, silk scarf, immaculate composure. She turned toward the elevator and saw me standing there. For a moment, our eyes locked. Hers narrowed, a hint of calculation behind that social smile. "Morning, Mother," she said smoothly. "Out for a walk. Just stretching my legs." I replied, "Old habits die hard. Some of us prefer doing things in the daylight." Her smile twitched. The elevator doors opened, and she disappeared inside, perfume lingering like a warning. That evening, Caleb showed up at my door again, pale and tense. "Mrs. Ellis," he whispered, "I think they know I've been helping you." I let him in and locked the door. I saw Doris talking to Sloan in the parking lot. "She mentioned my name," said the kid in maintenance. "I don't think I'm safe here." I poured him coffee. "You did the right thing, Caleb. But we're not done yet." He looked confused. "What else do you need from me?" "The elevator logs," I said. "The system records every access card, even cloned ones. Can you trace who used it the night Victor died?" He hesitated, then nodded. "Give me a few hours." While he worked, I looked around my apartment. The framed photo of Walter, the stack of unopened mail, the faint hum of the refrigerator. It all felt like background noise to a movie where I was no longer the audience, but the protagonist in the middle of Act 2, waiting for the explosion. At 2 a.m., Caleb texted me, "Found it. We need to talk." He came over 10 minutes later, laptop in hand. The screen glowed blue, lines of data scrolling. "Here," he said, pointing. At 8:14 p.m., an elevator fob was used from the parking garage. It wasn't Victor's or yours. It was a cloned ID. Whose, he swallowed, registered to Margo Ellis. The room spun. "That's impossible. It gets worse," he said, scrolling down. At 8:19, the same cloned fob accessed your floor 7B. Then again, at 2:07 a.m., when your envelope disappeared, my heartbeat thudded in my ears. My son. My own son's ID tied to both the murder and the break-in. But I knew Noah wasn't capable of killing, not alone. That left one explanation: someone had used him. Someone who knew how to clone access cards, how to manipulate data, how to hide fingerprints behind charm and designer handbags. Sloan. The next morning, I went to the building cafe, Rachel's Corner, the place where gossip fermented into fact. I ordered my usual black coffee, then quietly asked Rachel, the owner, if her exterior camera was still working. "Of course," she said. "Caught half the neighborhood's sins on that thing." "Why, I might need to borrow a glimpse of Sunday night," I said. Rachel raised an eyebrow but didn't ask questions. A few minutes later, she brought me the footage on a flash drive. "You didn't get this from me," she said. Back home, I watched the video on repeat. The timestamp matched 8:14 p.m. Victor entering the lobby. Seconds later, a figure followed a woman in a camel coat, her face turned away, holding a black tote bag. The frame froze as the door closed. Even in the grainy image, I recognized the glint of her bracelet Sloan's. The tote bag was large enough to hide anything: a laptop, a hard drive, even a weapon. That night, I couldn't sit still. I paced the apartment until my knees ached. Around midnight, I heard footsteps in the hallway, soft, cautious. Then a faint knock on my door, 3 short taps. I waited, holding my breath. Then a voice whispering, "Margo, it's Noah." I unlocked the door. He stood there, pale and broken, like a man who'd been living inside a storm. "Mom," he said quietly, "I need to tell you something." He stepped inside, glancing around nervously, as if the walls might be listening. "She made me do it," he said finally, "Sloan. She said it was just a meeting, that Victor was blackmailing us. I didn't mean for anyone to get hurt." His hands trembled. I went to talk to him. He got angry. There was shouting. He tried to leave, but He swallowed hard. I pushed him. Just to stop him from walking away, I stared at him, the room shrinking around us. And then he fell. He hit his head. There was blood. I panicked. I called Sloan. She told me to leave. She said she'd handle it. I sank into a chair, the weight of every year pressing down at once. "Oh, Noah." He covered his face, voice breaking. "I didn't mean to kill him, Mom. I swear." She said we'd lose everything if I told the truth. For a long moment, I couldn't speak. The world had gone quiet, like even time refused to move. When I finally did, my voice came out colder than I intended. "Then it's time she learns what losing everything really feels like." That night, I didn't sleep. I wrote everything down: the logs, the footage, the confession, the missing envelope, the perfume, the powder on Doris's gloves. I wasn't sure yet what my endgame was, but I knew one thing: Sloan had built her web too tightly, and webs tear easily when you pull the right thread. The next day, I called Noah and told him to come to dinner. "Bring your wife," I said. "It's time we talk about the family business." He hesitated. "Mom, what are you planning?" "Just dinner," I said softly, "but make sure she wears red. It suits her better for the occasion." The night of the dinner, Cambridge was drenched in rain, the kind that painted the streets in black glass and muffled sound, as if the city itself didn't want to witness what was about to unfold. I set the table in my apartment: white linen, crystal glasses, silverware polished to a mirror shine. 3 plates, 1 truth. I lit 2 candles. The flames flickered like nervous witnesses. At 7:03 p.m., there was a knock. Noah entered first, shoulders tight under his coat, eyes red-rimmed from sleepless nights. Sloane followed, wearing a red dress that shimmered under the light silk, predatory, the color of warning. "Mom," Noah murmured. "Sloane," I greeted her, voice steady. "You look radiant." She smiled, practiced and sharp. "You didn't say this was a formal dinner." "I'd have brought wine." "No need," I said, pouring 3 glasses myself. "We already have everything we need." Her eyes flicked to the folder on the buffet table. Black leather, closed, waiting. Dinner started quietly. Roast chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans, ordinary food for an extraordinary reckoning. I let them eat first. Let the illusion of normalcy stretch just long enough to make the truth hit harder. Finally, I set my fork down. "Tell me, Sloane, how's work?" She blinked. "Busy, as always, freelance financial coordination." "Isn't it?" I asked. "Sounds flexible." Her tone cooled. "What are you implying?" "Nothing," I said lightly. "Just that it's impressive how flexible one has to be to manage accounts across 3 shell companies, all registered under aliases that link back to your maiden name." The fork froze in her hand. "Excuse me," I gestured to the folder. "The paper trail. I had a little help. Apparently, the IRS loves good stories." Her voice turned brittle. "You have no idea what you're talking about, don't I?" I opened the folder slowly, revealing the printouts, wire transfers, screenshots, and a partial transcript from a podcast recording. "You used Noah's credentials to launder your father's settlement money into your firm. When Victor uncovered it, you panicked. You sent Noah to silence him." Noah's breath hitched. "Mom, stop." I turned to him. "You pushed him, didn't you?" He looked at Sloane. Her face was a mask. "She said it was an accident," he whispered. Sloane slammed her fork down. "He did it, Margo. He went to confront Victor. He lost control. You think I could have planned that?" "You planned everything," I said softly. "Even your own alibi." I stood, pacing slowly toward the buffet. "You wiped the CCTV footage using Doris Whitaker's credentials, paid her with HOA funds. You used Noah's cloned elevator fob to stage the timing. And when you realized Victor had given me something before he died, you broke into my apartment to steal it." Her eyes darkened. "You're insane." "Maybe," I said, pulling out a small envelope, "but insanity doesn't print timestamps." I tossed it onto the table. Inside was a single photograph: Sloane entering the lobby on the night of Victor's death, her tote bag in hand, her bracelet glinting under the camera outside Rachel's cafe. Her face went pale. "That proves nothing. Then maybe this will." I turned toward the side door, where Caleb stepped in, laptop in hand. His voice trembled slightly, but his resolve didn't. "The elevator logs," he said. "The cloned card activity matches Sloane's phone location data from that night." Sloane shot up from her chair. "You broke into my files." "No," Caleb said. "You left them open." She looked between us, realization dawning that the circle had closed. I leaned forward, voice quiet but cutting. "You used my son as your shield. You made him believe confessing would destroy him, when the only thing that could destroy him was you." Noah's eyes glistened. "She said Victor would go to the police, that I'd lose my job." Sloane cut him off. "Desperate now. You think your mother cares about you? She's setting you up to save her pride. She's jealous. I did what she never could control." The story. I smiled sadly. "You still don't understand, do you?" Sloane laughed bitterly. "Understand what? That this isn't about control. It's about consequence." At that exact moment, my phone buzzed. I pressed speaker. A voice crackled through. Detective Fiona Park. "Mrs. Ellis, we received your files. The DA just confirmed the warrants. We're on our way." Sloane's face drained of color. She turned to Noah, whispering frantically. "You called them?" "No," I said. "I did." Her voice rose, sharp and venomous. "You think you've won? You've destroyed your son's life." "No," I said softly, stepping closer. "I saved it." She lunged for the folder, but Caleb blocked her. The door burst open. Detective Park entered, 2 officers behind her. Sloane Mercer Park announced, "You're under arrest for obstruction of justice, evidence tampering, and financial fraud." Sloane froze, eyes wide. "This isn't over," she hissed. "No," I said. "It never really is." As they cuffed her, the candle flames wavered in the draft. Noah sank into a chair, head in his hands. I reached over, resting my palm on his shoulder. "She used you," I whispered, "but she doesn't define you." He looked up, eyes brimming. "I didn't mean to kill him, Mom, I know," I said, "but meaning doesn't erase consequence. Now we face it, together." Detective Park nodded toward me as she led Sloane out. "Good work, Mrs. Ellis." "You could have been one of us." I smiled faintly. Once upon a time I was. The door closed, leaving only the flicker of the candles and the smell of rain drifting through the cracked window. For a long moment, Noah and I sat in silence. Then I reached across the table, picked up Walter's old wine glass, and raised it slightly. "To truth," I said quietly, "even when it hurts." He nodded, voice breaking. "To truth." Outside, the sirens faded into the distance. Inside, the world exhaled. The apartment felt unbearably still after Sloane was gone, the kind of stillness that's louder than noise, where every tick of the clock echoes like judgment. The candle flames had melted into shallow pools of wax, trembling with every breath I took. Noah sat by the window, staring into the rain. "She said Victor was going to expose us," he murmured, "that he'd ruin everything Dad built." I thought I was protecting the family. I walked to the cabinet and pulled out Walter's box, the one I'd kept sealed since the day he died. Inside lay his old tape recorder and a silver key, small enough to fit in my palm. "Your father once told me," I said, "that protecting the family doesn't always mean shielding it from pain. Sometimes it means letting the pain come." I placed the key on the table. Noah frowned. "What's that?" "The last thing Victor gave me before he died wasn't the note," I said softly. "It was this." I unlocked the tiny pendant I'd worn around my neck for years. The miniature lock I'd told everyone was just a charm. Inside was a micro SD card. I inserted it into the recorder. Static. Then Walter's voice, low and steady. "If you're hearing this, it means what I feared came true. Sloane Mercer isn't who she pretends to be. She's using Noah, just like her father used others before her. But there's one more name, Margo, one you'll need to be careful of. Someone she works for." Noah's head snapped up. "What do you mean?" "Works for," Walter's voice continued. "Follow the money trail, and you'll find a familiar face." I wanted to handle it quietly, but Victor found out first. He knew too much. The tape clicked off. The silence that followed was heavier than the rain outside. Noah's hands shook. "There's someone else." "Yes," I said, "and whoever it is, they're still out there." I looked toward the window. Across the courtyard, in Doris's old apartment, now supposedly vacant, a faint light flickered. The curtains moved, as if someone had just stepped aside. Watching. I drew the blinds slowly. "This isn't over," I murmured. "It never is." Noah looked at me. "What are you going to do?" I met his eyes. "Exactly what I've always done. Pay attention." I slipped the keychain back around my neck, the metal cold against my skin. A reminder. A promise. A weapon. Some truths destroy, others protect. But the rarest kind, the ones worth fighting for, do both. And as the storm raged outside, I smiled faintly to myself, because if they thought I was done, they had no idea who they were still playing with. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted, you know the silence afterward is the loudest sound in the world. I learned that truth doesn't always heal, it exposes, but once it's out, you can finally breathe again. So tell me, have you ever had to choose between justice and love, between protecting someone and exposing what they did? Before you go, don't forget to hit like and subscribe, because if you've ever felt like the outsider in your own family, you'll understand that this story isn't over, and neither am I.